Hello everyone and welcome back. In this episode, we are going to focus on something that is called functions. Now, we used functions before this lesson actually, because as you remember, we used something that is called built-in functions like the following you see in the screen, but we did not create our own functions yet, and this is what we are going to do in this lesson and in the next episodes. So we are going to learn how to create our own functions, how to use them, and how to write more organized code with the functions. Let's begin. So, in order to know how to work with functions, we need to divide this into two important steps. And the first one is going to be to actual creation of the function, and the second one is going to be to call the function, all right? How you execute that function. So let's give a simple example about how functions working. And we need to start with a keyword that is called def, and that's a shortened way to say define. So we are defining a function, and here our code expects to some name to our function. So let's call this gyms underscore function, and by the way, the convention names of the functions are like variables, so between words we have the underscore, and make sure to make a parenthesis right after that and hit the colon sign, and once we hit the enter, we are inserting inside the function. As you remember, we talked about the indentation in Python already. So every command or variable or anything that I'm going to do is going to belong to that gyms function, all right? So let's simply try to print three sentences in three separated print functions. So let's print this is the first print, and later on let's do second print, and one final one, let's do the third print. Now I can go outside of my function, and if I execute this, you don't have to be surprised because nothing just happened. This is fine, okay? As you remember, in the beginning of this episode, I told you how in order to work with functions, we need to divide this into two steps. So the first one is the creation, and the second one is the execute part. So now in order to execute our function, we simply need to specify its name, and as I write gym, the IDE, which is PyCharm, is going to complete me, and this is fine. And now if I run this, I will get the result as expected. But you have to understand the beauty behind functions. The beauty behind functions, it allows you to execute multiple times something that you want. So if I want to print three times, then I can just call this function three times. So if I go here and do the same thing three times and run this one more time, this will happen three times. So this is the beauty behind functions, and I'm going to stop here and delete all the code that we just wrote. Or before I move on, I want to show one last thing. Let's just copy this function, alright, with Ctrl X and put it in the fourth line. Now what happens? You created the function in that file, but you are calling it before the creation of the function. This is where 50% of the programmers that I know are being confused. Because in the first step, you have to create your function, and right after that, you can call it. So this is really important to be aware of, and in the future, we are going to put our functions in a separated file, and we can import them. So this is really going to be like creating our own module. And that is actually the point that I really wanted to specify, so you don't get confused in the future when you work with functions. And now let's move on to another example and learn how we can make our functions more advanced and more useful. So let's just clean all the code right there. Alright, so as we work with a clean file, once again, let's just create one more function that is called square. Don't forget the brackets right after the name of the function. And this is where I want to stop and explain some important point that will actually can take your functions to an advanced level. You can put here some parameters that is going to be accepted throughout the execution of this function. So for example, I can put a parameter that is called number, and when I call this function, I can assign that number so the function would be executed and act differently to any value that I specify to this parameter. So you will see in a second what I mean by that, and let's hit the colon sign once again. And what I want to do is actually print the numbers square. Okay, so how we do that? We just take the number that the user is specifying when we call the function, and we just hit now the double asterisk sign and then hit 2, because this is going to be the second power of the number we specify. And now we can go out of this function and execute it, and check out what will happen if I call this function. And now we have to specify that number because the function is requesting that number. So if I put here 4, for example, and execute this, you'll see that I will get result as 16 because this is the result of this math function. And we have two ways to specify our arguments to a parameter, alright? So we can just hit 4 because as we have only one parameter that is required, Python will already know how to make the match between the number and the argument you specified. But the more clean way, the more preferred way, in my opinion, is actually to do something like number equal to 4. And this will allow your code to be more readable if another person is going to read your program in the future. And we can actually repeat this call of the function multiple times and it will act differently. So in the first example, what we did is 4, and we want to also see the square of 6 of 7. So if I execute this, I will get back 36 and 49 because I'm printing that number. So one final thing that I want to show you, and we will stop the video here, you can actually create a parameter that is required or not required, okay? So the professional word to spell that is mandatory or non-mandatory. A non-mandatory parameter is a parameter that you don't have to specify it and the function will execute anyways, and a mandatory parameter is actually a parameter that could not be executed if it is not specified. Let me show you what I mean by that. So let's say that we want to write a function that is going to return how old you are going to be in 5 years. So we understand that we have to accept some parameter that is probably going to call age, and it is going to just print age plus 5, alright? But we want to make this function to perform in a way that if you do not specify your age, then it is going to take your age, alright? So let's just write the function and let's call it in 5 years, something like that. And here I can create my parameter, but I can assign a default value to that parameter. So if this parameter is not specified in the execution of that function, then it is going to take that default value, alright? So we can create here age equals to 24, but pay attention that I'm doing this in the function and between the parentheses. So let's hit the colon sign again and print something like age plus 5. All right, and once we do this and go outside of the function and execute this, okay, we have two options, and as you see, it already popped me up. It says to me, okay, so in this function I have the value of 24. If you do not specify anything, then I'm going to take that 24, but if you are specifying, then it's fine. I will override that 24 by the number you want. Okay, so if I put here age equal to 30 and execute this, I will get back 35. But let's just execute this function one more time, and this time I do not want to specify the argument of age, and if I run this, you see the function is still running, but it takes that default value of 24. So this is a really powerful option that you have in functions. Not every programming language that I'm familiar with supports this kind of feature, so it is really nice. And that will be it for this video. In the next video, we are going to divide our function kinds into two, all right? So this is going to be also very interesting. And that's it. Don't forget to crack the subscribe button and also like this video. Comment below any question you have and I will answer immediately. See you in the next one.